Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. So you also, when you see all these things, know that it is near, at the doors. Assuredly, I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will by no means pass away. Hi, it's Leahz. I have some very important prophecy news to share with you. All of them have to do with catastrophic events that could potentially happen here on this earth. We know that we are living in the end times, and we know the Bible clearly talks about earthquakes, volcanoes, starvation. It also mentions heavenly bodies hitting the earth. What would happen if a heavenly body hit the earth? Well, it would cause earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, darkness on the earth. It would cause the moon to appear red like blood. It would cause all sorts of ecological disasters as well, which would in turn cause starvation and many other types of things that are not good. Again, we're living in the end times, so these things will eventually happen. It's all just a matter of time. When exactly? Well, nobody really knows. Only God knows. We can only speculate. However, we do know that it won't be long. So let's watch these things and be prayerful and stay close to the Lord. Here's the first article, and it is on Daily Mail. I am viewing it in clearly in order that we don't have to look at the advertisements for their other articles on the right side of the screen, which are inappropriate. So that's why we're viewing it in clearly. We're also going to be looking at an article in space.com. It says an asteroid just half a mile wide could unleash a mini ice age if it hits the Earth. Impact may reduce temperatures by 8 degrees Celsius. A 0.6 mile wide asteroid could trigger a mini ice age if it strikes land, a new study claims. The impact would throw up dust and soot into the atmosphere that would cause average temperatures around the world to fall by as much as 8 degrees Celsius. Scientists have warned the very severe global impact would last several years, causing the world to become a much darker, colder, and drier place. Now, here's the kicker. It's the caption beneath the photo. It says, scientists at NASA's Center for NEO Studies in California say there is no possibility that this object could impact Earth during the flyby next month, but they have identified an extremely remote chance that this small asteroid could impact on September 28th of 2017 with odds of 1 in 250 million. Now, that's a small chance, but when we know we're living in the end times and the book of Revelation clearly describes a heavenly body hitting the earth, it is something worth watching. It says asteroid to come within 11,000 miles of Earth on 5th of March. Last week, NASA announced that a 100-foot wide asteroid first spotted when it flew by Earth 2 years ago, set to make its return on the 5th of March. The space rock may skim past Earth at just 11,000 miles, which is around 21 times closer to Earth than the moon. But NASA admits this estimate may be widely inaccurate, and the asteroid may also pass Earth as far out as 9 million miles. In both scenarios, the space agency says the asteroid dubbed 2013 TX68 poses no threat to Earth. These would not be pleasant times, Charles Bardeen of the National Center for Atmospheric Research said in December during a presentation at the American Geophysical Union. Bardeen and his team believe the impact would create a 9-mile-wide crater, throwing massive amounts of dust into the atmosphere, according to a report in space.com, which we're going to look at in a second. If the strike doesn't occur in a desert, the impact would also produce huge fires that would release soot into the air. In the worst case scenario, soot would remain in the atmosphere for around 10 years, while dust take 6 years to settle back on Earth. This would reduce the amount of sunlight hitting Earth's surface by around 20% for the first few years, Bardeen believes. As a result, average global surface temperatures would cool by 8 degrees Celsius, which is about the equivalent of the ice ages, he said. And Bardeen claims the top layers of the ocean would still be about 0.5 degrees Celsius cooler than normal 15 years after the asteroid impact. The global cooling would also lead to a drop in rainfall of about 50%. This is due to the lost heating and the lost temperature, so we lose convection. We don't have as many weather fronts. Meanwhile, with the planet blanketed, chemical reactions that damage the ozone layer would be sped up. Let's take a look at this article on space.com because it's got a lot more information that's pretty interesting. Then I'm going to show you some articles of interest in other areas of prophecy that are happening. Here's the article on space.com. Now, we already went over this information about the mini ice age and about what Bardeen had to say about that. Bardeen and his colleagues modeled what would happen to Earth's climate if a 0.6 mile wide space rock plowed into one of the planet's land masses. Such an impact would probably gouge out a crater about 9 miles wide, throw huge amounts of dust into the atmosphere, and trigger large-scale fires that lofted lots of soot into the air, provided the strike didn't occur in a desert area with little vegetation, Bardeen said. The material lofted after this hypothetical asteroid strike would stay in the atmosphere for a long time. Now, we read about that. It said about 6 years in the case of dust and 10 years for soot, according to the researchers' results for the worst case scenario. These particles would warm in the sun, heating the stratosphere significantly and speeding up chemical reactions that destroy ozone, which protects Earth from harmful ultraviolet radiation. Indeed, atmospheric ozone would be temporarily reduced by 55%, causing the surface UV index to top 20 in the tropics for several years. According to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, a UV index of 11 or above denotes extreme risk of harm from unprotected sun exposure. The atmospheric soot and dust would also reduce the amount of sunlight hitting Earth's surface by up to 70% for the first year or two. As a result, average global surface temperatures would cool by 14.5 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about the equivalent of the ice ages. Now, they go on to talk more about the temperature, the decrease in sunlight, and everything else we've already discussed. So looking down further here, because most of this we already covered in the other article, it says ocean impact. Bardeen and his team modeled the aftermath of an asteroid strike on land, but it's more likely that a space rock would come down in water since oceans cover about 70% of Earth's surface. What would happen then? A 2010 modeling study by the late Elisabetta Pirazzo and her colleagues looked into this scenario and determined that the effects on Earth's protective ozone layer would be dramatic. An ocean strike by a 0.6 mile wide asteroid, the team found, would loft enough salty water vapor to destroy huge quantities of ozone, causing the surface UV index to spike temporarily to 56. Such high radiation levels, which have never been experienced in human history, would probably force people to stay inside during the day, Pirazzo said when the study came out. But an ocean strike would not have the same climatic consequences as a land impact. The temperature effects, the precipitation effects, the effects on plants, those would all really only come with the land impact. However, the chances of an asteroid strike with serious global consequences seem remote, at least in the near future. To date, astronomers have spotted 879 near-Earth asteroids that are at least 0.6 miles wide, and none of them pose an immediate threat. Models suggest that these 879 represent more than 90% of the total population of such mountain-sized space rocks in Earth's neighborhood, NASA officials have said. If a dangerous asteroid does line Earth up in its crosshairs, humanity doesn't have to sit idly by just waiting for the end to come. If the space rock is detected with enough lead time, ideally a decade or more before a potential impact, it could conceivably be steered off course using one or more kinetic impactor spacecraft that would slam into the space rock, and perhaps a fly-along gravity tractor probe as well, which would further nudge the asteroid slowly over long periods of time. Now, I find this next paragraph a little bit amusing because how many times have we had a near Earth object that they didn't know about until it was really close? Or look at the one that happened in Russia several years ago. They had no idea that was coming till it was too late. But they say here that if a dangerous asteroid does line Earth up in its crosshairs, humanity doesn't have to sit by idly waiting for the end to come. If the space rock is detected with enough lead time, ideally a decade or more before a potential impact, it could conceivably be steered off course using one or more kinetic impactor spacecraft that would slam into the space rock and perhaps a fly-along gravity tractor probe as well, which would further nudge the asteroid slowly over long periods of time. Okay, so, well, if these things are going to happen and it's in Bible prophecy, apparently the heavenly body or heavenly bodies that will hit the earth as described during the tribulation, well, they're not going to be able to destroy them, nor are they going to be detected in time, because the Bible does say that it hits the earth and it causes a lot of damage.
Hi there, Yulia. Well, remember, imagine you're driving to work on a beautiful, calm Friday morning, and suddenly a massive fireball appears out of nowhere in the sky. You're thinking to yourself, is this a plane crash? Is this a rocket attack, a UFO? But when it comes to the Urals region in Chelyabinsk, the city in Russia, it's actually a meteor shower. This is what took place this morning. Really stunning images that you're seeing there right now. Now, what we know from officials, according to officials and eyewitnesses, is that a series of explosions, possibly 5 to 6, took place when this meteor exploded in the air, raining down molten hot debris onto the ground. Now, this has caused widespread panic in at least 3 cities. Witnesses reported the walls of houses shaking, windows being blown out, cell phones even reportedly stopped working in some areas. Now, we're still getting the details. Details are still slowly coming in from officials, but what we know so far is that there are no casualties, no massive injuries. At least that's what we're hearing at the moment. There has been some concern about potential small injuries at a school, unconfirmed. So some schools are reportedly being evacuated. We're also hearing that a zinc factory was hit by a piece of the meteor, but no leaks reported so far. Officials did do preliminary testing of radiation levels in the area. They say that that is okay, but of course tests are going to continue throughout the day. The biggest issue right now is the falling debris and the smoke, the black smoke that people are reporting that is hanging in the air. So very, very shocking developments, probably not the kind of surprise you want to see on your way to work on Friday morning. One interesting fact of note is that the world is closely watching another meteor that's supposed to graze past the Earth later on this evening. That's the size of an Olympic-sized swimming pool. This is an unrelated incident, and of course, as it develops, we will continue to bring you more information. Again, no casualties reported so far. Radiation levels are okay at the moment, but of course, we'll have to keep you up to date as the developments come in.
So let's move along now to something else.
It's predicted to be worse than Hurricane Katrina, worse than the San Francisco earthquake of 1906. Scientists and FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, are warning of a pending doom for the Pacific Northwest. An earthquake along a little-known fault line that would kill thousands and affect millions. The Cascadia Subduction Zone stretches about 700 miles from Cape Mendocino, California, to Vancouver, Canada. Big cities expected to be affected include Seattle and Portland. Some scientists believe the earthquake, when it goes off, will reach between 8.7 and 9.2 on the Richter scale and cause a tsunami. So will this new revelation become a reality? Is it only a matter of time? I was joined earlier by John Vidale, a seismologist at the University of Washington. I first asked him why we're just now hearing about this little-known fault line in the Northwest that appears to be so much worse than the San Andreas, the commonly known fault line in California. So FEMA is holding an event next summer called Cascadia Rising to practice preparation for an incident along this fault line. So I want to pull up some of the estimations that you were just referring to. We got these directly from FEMA today. Estimations they're using to plan for a natural disaster in the Pacific Northwest. They project a disaster along this fault line could result in 13,000 people dying, 27,000 people being injured, 1 million people being displaced and needing shelter, and an additional 2.5 million people needing food and water. So these numbers, they really are staggering, but you're saying they're not quite realistic.
Yeah, they're partly for the exercise to make sure we take care of all the things we need to watch out for. So it's a bit of a worst case. The numbers that are kind of objective and for the use of planning for preparing are more in the order of 1,000 people killed, 2,000 people killed, and $100 billion of damage.
Earthquakes, that's what we're going to talk about next. There's a lot of talk about earthquakes, and yes, over the past years, there has been a dramatic increase in earthquake activity. This first article, alarming discovery shows Bay Area's two most dangerous earthquake faults may be connected. Says scientists have discovered an alarming connection underwater to the most dangerous earthquake faults in the Bay Area. Experts long debated whether the Hayward Fault and the Rogers Creek Fault connected, but now there's strong evidence they do. U.S. geological geophysicist Janet Watt made the discovery in an underwater survey using an acoustic instrument over the San Pablo Bay. She says the data is clearer than ever. We now have direct evidence that the faults come closer together in the bay and may be directly connected, says Watt. It would be devastating for an earthquake to rupture at both those faults. It would be a very strong earthquake. Two Bay Area fault lines could potentially trigger a 7.3 magnitude earthquake if they ruptured together. That's stronger than the 1989 Loma Prieta quake. Do you see how dependent on God we are? Look at all these natural disasters that could happen. We're just sitting here and we live every day and we don't really think about the things that could happen that God protects us from. Well, we could be sitting ducks for an asteroid, a meteor, or a comet. An earthquake could happen at any time. You could just be sitting there in your home and the earth could split in half right beneath you. But you don't think about those things. Do you wake up every day and thank God that an earthquake hasn't happened in your area that has caused mass damage? It happens all over the world. Do you wake up every day and thank God that there is not an asteroid that landed on my street? These are natural disasters. They are things that do happen. They're things that have happened, but yet we take it for granted that they don't happen. But according to Bible prophecy, these things are going to happen, and we are living in the end times. Yet nobody seems to concern themselves with the reality. And I've never seen so much news as I have in the past few years on earthquakes and asteroids and meteors and comets. I'm seeing more and more of that. There's a reason for that. I believe something is going to happen. Now, I don't know when. I get accused of setting dates if I report dates that other people are saying. As for me, I don't know a date. God has not given me a date. I don't believe God really gives dates. But all I can say is it's going to happen. And it's going to happen soon. What is soon? Well, I don't know. Soon could be in a few weeks. It could be in a few months. It could be in a few years. That's pretty soon. Even 20 years from now is soon. However, I would venture to say that we don't have 20 years left. The way prophecy is moving so quickly, if I compare what's happening to what the Bible says. So let's move along to some more articles about earthquakes. Now, here's just a short article about an earthquake that hit just last month. This is magnitude 4.5 earthquake shakes Southern California from inland empire to coast. The early morning earthquake was centered in the Banning area, about 85 miles east of Los Angeles. Okay, you can see some of the damage in the photo. That's just to give you an example. This is not the only one, but I came across it. It went well with this video I'm doing, so I wanted to show it to you. Let's go to the next one. Here's one by Michael Snyder. It says, a new Madrid earthquake is coming and America will be shaken like never before. Now, you've probably seen this picture many times. It shows highlighted the danger zones here, and it shows you the red area. Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, Missouri, and Illinois all have the red area. That means really bad. There are also approximately 17 nuclear reactors on the New Madrid fault line in this area here. Also, back in the 1800s, I'm sure most of you know this, but just to mention, this was the last major earthquake on the New Madrid fault line. And it was so bad, it actually caused the Mississippi River to flow backwards. They call it the sleeping giant. Why? Because it's a fault line of mass destruction. When that sleeping giant wakes up, it's going to unleash hell on this nation, and it could potentially split the nation in half. So this is something to watch. There have been a couple of different people who have had prophecies and dreams to do with a major catastrophe associated with the New Madrid fault line. So let's go ahead and take a look at what the article says. Michael Snyder makes a lot of important points in this article. And by the way, I was just skimming through it some more, and it's 15 nuclear reactors. I had said that I wasn't sure, but I thought it was 17, and it's not, it's 15. Now, he talks about how most Americans expect the next great earthquake to be on the West Coast, and we just talked about that, and you saw the news piece. So now we're going to look at the East Coast, okay? Or actually in the middle of the United States, but more closer to the eastern half of that middle. Okay, it talks about what I told you about when the New Madrid went off. It was back in 1811 and 1812, and it caused the Mississippi River to run backwards. Let's see what he has to say about that. It says, most Americans expect the next great earthquake in the U.S. to come on the West Coast, but what if it strikes right down the middle of the country instead? The New Madrid fault zone is 6 times larger than the San Andreas fault zone in California, and it covers portions of Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Missouri, Arkansas, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Mississippi. Back in 1811 and 1812, a series of absolutely devastating earthquakes along the New Madrid fault zone opened very deep fissures in the ground, caused the Mississippi River to run backwards in some places, and were reportedly felt as far away as Washington, D.C. and Boston. They were the strongest earthquakes ever recorded east of the Rocky Mountains, and scientists tell us that it is only a matter of time before we experience similar quakes. In fact, the U.S. Geological Survey has admitted that the New Madrid fault zone has the potential for larger and more powerful quakes than previously thought. And the number of significant earthquakes in the middle part of the country has more than quintupled in recent years. Someday, perhaps without any warning, an absolutely massive earthquake will strike the New Madrid fault. Thousands of Americans will die, tens of thousands of structures will be completely destroyed, and millions of people will find themselves homeless. And in many cases, well, without their family. There will be a lot of suffering, emotionally, physically. I can only imagine. In fact, I probably can't imagine how horrific that would be, to be honest. Wouldn't want to either. What else could be expected? Well, he writes, unlike on the West Coast, buildings within the New Madrid fault zone are typically not constructed to withstand major earthquakes. If we were to see the type of earthquake that we saw a little over 2 centuries ago, it would be a disaster unlike anything that any of us have ever known. The following comes from WKRN, and it describes what those earthquakes back in 1811 and 1812 were like. So as this is being described, I want you to picture what this type of devastation would mean for us today, especially with all of our technology that we are so dependent upon. Can you believe that in the winter of 1811-1812, a series of earthquakes in northwest Tennessee shook the ground so hard that church bells rang on the East Coast and sidewalks cracked in Washington, D.C.? The sitting president, James Madison, was even awakened in the middle of the night by the shaking of the White House. In Tennessee and surrounding states, the early settlers and Native American Indians were terrified by the shaking. Large fissures opened up in the ground, and some witnessed the Mississippi River appearing to flow backwards. It is believed that those quakes shook an area 10 times larger than that impacted by the 7.8 San Francisco earthquake of 1906. Some of the giant cracks that opened up in the ground were up to 5 miles long, and the stench of fire and brimstone — by the way, brimstone is sulfur for those of you who don't know, but I'm sure most of you do — hung in the air for months afterwards. So not days, but months. Fortunately, the middle of the country was not heavily populated in 1811 and 1812, so the overall amount of damage was not that great. The following comes from Smithsonian. The Midwest was sparsely populated and deaths were few, but 8-year-old Godfrey Lesher saw the ground rolling in waves. Michael Braun observed the river suddenly rise up like a great loaf of bread to the height of many feet. Sections of riverbed below the Mississippi rose so high that part of the river ran backward. Thousands of fissures ripped open fields and geysers burst from the earth, spewing sand, water, mud, and coal high into the air. Needless to say, if such a disaster happened today, the damage would be absolutely catastrophic. This is something that government officials have studied, and their conclusions are rather sobering. In a report filed in November of 2008, the U.S. Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, warned that a serious earthquake in the New Madrid seismic zone could result in the highest economic losses due to a natural disaster in the United States, further predicting widespread and catastrophic damage across Alabama, Arkansas, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Mississippi, Missouri, and particularly Tennessee, where a 7.7 magnitude quake or greater would cause damage of tens of thousands of structures affecting water distribution, transportation systems, and other vital infrastructure. Do you remember how traumatized people were when a few thousand Americans were killed on 9/11? Well, how would the country react to a disaster that killed 100,000 Americans instantly? A few years ago, the federal government held a major 5-day simulation known as National Level Exercise 11 that attempted to portray what a major New Madrid earthquake would look like. In May, the federal government simulated an earthquake so massive it killed 100,000 Midwesterners instantly and forced more than 7 million people out of their homes. At the time, National Level Exercise 11 went largely unnoticed. The scenario seemed too far-fetched. States like Illinois and Missouri are in the middle of a tectonic plate, not at the edge of one. A major quake happens there once every several generations. Could you imagine what that would mean for our nation? In addition to the human toll, financial markets would completely collapse. Key infrastructure throughout the region would be totally destroyed, and transportation on and across the Mississippi River would be brought to a standstill. According to international insurance giant Swiss Re, if the 1811 and 1812 New Madrid earthquakes were to happen today, the economic losses alone would be in the hundreds of billions of dollars. Okay, we're going to skip past this part, not because it's not important, but there's a lot of information here, and I think you're getting the picture. It is also important to remember that there are 15 nuclear reactors along the New Madrid fault zone. If a major earthquake did hit the area, we could be looking at Fukushima times 15. Scientists tell us that there is a very deep scar in the earth in this region that makes the New Madrid fault zone mechanically weaker than much of the rest of North America. The following comes from Wikipedia. The faults responsible for the New Madrid seismic zone are embedded in a subsurface geological feature known as the Real Foot Rift that formed during the breakup of the supercontinent Rodinia in the Neoproterozoic era about 750 million years ago. The resulting rift system failed to split the continent, but has remained as an oligocene or a scar of weakness deep underground, and its ancient faults appear to have made the Earth's crust in the New Madrid area mechanically weaker than much of the rest of North America. This relative weakness is important because it would allow the relatively small east-west compressive forces associated with the continuing continental drift of the North American plate to reactivate old faults around New Madrid, making the area unusually prone to earthquakes, in spite of it being far from the nearest tectonic plate boundary. Michael Snyder goes on to conclude, I believe that a major New Madrid earthquake is coming. That is one of the reasons why I included such an earthquake in my novel. Those that choose to live in that region are literally sitting on top of a ticking time bomb, and at some point, it is going to blow. Of course, I wouldn't want to be living on the West Coast right now either. The shaking of our planet continues to intensify, and this is going to cause great tragedies in the U.S. during the years ahead. The warning signs are all around us. In 2015, the state of Oklahoma shattered their all-time record for earthquakes in a single year, and volcanoes that were thought to be totally dormant are now erupting again all over the planet. A great shaking is coming to America very soon. As I mentioned a while ago, there seems to be a lot of news about concerns regarding different types of natural disasters, whether it's earthquakes, asteroids, tsunamis, volcanoes, flooding, many different things. There are a lot of concerns. All the signs are there that something is getting ready to happen. Things are happening. And I just can't tell everyone enough that we all need to be more spiritually prepared, draw as close to the Lord as we possibly can. And we need to also make physical preparations. I know I hear the pre-tribbers out there saying that they don't need to. Well, disasters happen all over the world every single day. And it's only ignorant to not be prepared. There will be things, if you're a pre-tribber, just know that there will be things that will hit you. If you're mid-trib, post-trib, whatever trib you are, we need to be prepared. There's no excuse. And for you pre-tribbers out there, I have one more thing to mention. I come into a lot of contact with pre-tribbers who say I don't need to do anything, I won't be here. Well, I know that it is your belief that there will be people left behind who will find the Lord. Shouldn't you make preparations that will be left behind for them? It's important. It is important now that those people get fed spiritually so they know, and it's important now that you start preparing for yourself and for those who will be here. So no matter what your belief is, there's no excuse why you're ignoring all the signs around you and not doing more to be prepared in every single possible way. I hope this video has helped you. If you feel like it informed you more or you found it interesting, please, feel free to share it anywhere you want and share the love of Jesus Christ more than anything else because time is short. God bless you.